Mission fucking accomplished. Goon Swarm is not a threat.
Good luck with your old dumb nullsec war. Snuffed out #1. Anomake Keepstar is next, and then come on.
There, then you were just going to fucking magically jump into EVE Online in a system, and it was just going to load, and nobody was going to call you fucking stupid later?
There's an Eagle fleet that has dive bombed a Megatron fleet. This is the bravest shit I have ever seen in my life.
The best possible shot to do something to the Imperium, and you fucked it up.
I talked a lot of shit over the last couple months. It's time to fucking eat some. And I showed up here to eat shit. Like,
the reason that this keeps started and get contested, and I cannot make this up, is because of tie-dye.
Guess where goons are going to live after this war is over?
Current plan is 319, I believe, right?
Delph.
High sec.
I can tell you very clearly, our Diplos didn't even fucking care. Like,
What?
White daddy.
You.
Me. Thank you, Redline.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Welcome to another Untethered. Today, we have some guests from various places across New Eden, including Lowsec and Nullsec. A hugely varied selection. Nuke, we got Nuke Michael from Snuffed Out.
Hello.
How are you doing today? Have you killed enough dreads in the last 3 weeks?
I'd like more, honestly, but it's going well.
Going well. Showing Nullsec how it's done. We've also got Mario Rafbardo here from Rote, one of the people key to Drakedon's success on the CSM, no doubt. How are you, Murray?
Pretty good. Hanging out in Turner, doing my thing.
Hanging out in Turner now that it is vacated by a bigger, scarier group, right?
Who?
But Bennett hasn't vacated Turner.
Really? Because I'm not really seeing them around. I mean, I live in Amamaki, and we're trying to get dropped, and just nothing ever happens. We clearly need to move back up to Black Rise. But I tell you what, you never dropped us there either. I don't know what. There's all this reputation about Snuff dropping everything that moves. Never saw it. But
wait, you mostly fly frigates, though. We don't drop on frigates.
And speaking of frigates, we've also got Villy with us, EVE Online's original small ganger. How you doing, Villy?
I'm doing well. Just continuing to hide in the shadows of EVE Online, enjoying my time, playing in a variety of spaces and a variety of fleets. You know, just living the standard no-block line member lifestyle.
Oh, like a sort of semi-retirement where you still do your job, but you don't have to concentrate as hard anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that is accurate. The hard jobs are hard, and, you know, not all of us have, 20,000 free hours to spend on them anymore.
I think half of the people in the show are in the EVE retirement home at this point.
Well, I mean, that's not what I intended to sort of kick us off talking about, but that's a good point. There's so many people who have played this game for a long time who still pay either by a Plex or by purchasing Omega, despite never really feeling like they want to undock, and I feel like they're missing out. But I'll tell you what,
I'm in
something
this picture,
that
and I don't like it.
Something that I definitely don't feel that they are missing out on, which you may or may not agree with, is everybody's favourite pastime in EVE, bashing structures. When was the last time any of you guys shot a Citadel? I mean, I know that did Snuff shoot that Citadel today, Nuke? I mean, I know that it's probably the wrong time of day for you to be there personally, but obviously Snuff.
I don't think so,
today,
but we did have Structure Bash yesterday, so the answer for me would be yesterday.
Yesterday. Murray, when was the last time you shot a Citadel?
Last week? Week before?
Yeah? Did you mean it, or was it just plinking it?
I mean, I wouldn't have complained if it was RF, but it's mostly to try and fight whoever would defend it.
Okay. Villy, can you remember the last time you actually saw a Citadel explode? Was it any time recently?
Unfortunately, like a week ago. I mean, listen, if you're doing anything null member related at any part of EVE space, you're going to end up shooting a Citadel within usually a week or two. Whether they explode and on the first, second, or third timer is a different question, but certainly I've unfortunately had to spend enough time at damage cap shooting structures in the last couple months that I won't forget.
Do you think that there's any sort of very obvious low hanging fruit changes that would make you be willing to spend the same amount of time but shooting twice as many citadels? What would get you to shoot these objectives more often?
Oh, damn, that's a tough question.
The obvious answer is for shooting them to more often result in actually getting a fight out of it. Because I feel like about 80 to 85% of the time when I shoot a citadel, nothing ends up, either the citadel dies undefended, or we just don't bother to follow up, and there's just no fight over it. Then that's what, generally, unless you're trying to evict someone from space, the reason you're shooting a structure is to try to get the people owning it to fight.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, a structure timer, a reinforced timer, is in some ways it's a two-edged sword, isn't it? It's fantastic in that it sets a time for both sides to prepare, rather than this just being a game of ambushing people who aren't ready constantly, But that notification, in an extremely EVE Online way, allows people to perhaps pick up a phone and try and turn it into a non-event with various excuses.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a situation where people try to turn things into non-events so much as they're attempting to set the stage for a victorious battle on their end, right? Usually people aren't blobbing so they don't get a fight. They're blobbing so that if there is a fight, they're the ones that win it. It's not a situation where people are like, hell yeah, let's go blue ball, me and my 500 friends, right? It's, hell yeah, let's go, get 500 friends so that if they show up with 400 friends, I can still have a reasonable chance at victory.
I'd agree with that. I feel like it really comes down to most of the time people will just bat phone so they have a chance to fight. Like, I don't mind. We get bat phoned against all the time, and that's perfectly fine because it's snuff. And if I'm shooting some group that has half our size and doesn't have any cap structure, then I know they can't fight us without a bat phone. And if they want to go bat phone someone so that a fight happens, go for it, right? People are just really bad at bat phoning the quote unquote proper amount so that the fight happens.
There's not really sort of any situation where you send a ping and then people start joining the fleet, and you get enough, and then you say to everyone else who's turning up, no, we don't need you. Go back. We've got enough now.
That is the other thing is once you've rung the phone, it's very difficult for most groups to unring it.
Yeah,
because you've already made them form up. You've already wasted their time.
Yeah, especially if you think like, oh, this group usually calls Horde to a timer, right? So I'm going to need this and that to fight them plus Horde. And then only they show up. And you're like, oh, I mean, I guess I can curb stomp your like 40 dudes and hurricanes, but that's not what we were prepared to fight.
No, that's not what you wanted to do when you were forming. You didn't want to be the blob, but you ended up being it just because that's how the chips fell.
And it's not interesting to do.
That's kind of even at small levels as well, though. If there's 3 of you roaming around and you happen across one guy, you're not just going to let him go because you outnumber him, are you?
Yeah. No one has... I won't say no one, but generally, people don't have that sort of honor in EVE where you'll be like, oh, wow, I outnumbered this dude, I'm just not going to fight him because then it would be unfair.
Yeah, I mean,
you're just going to pop the dude and move on.
The exciting part of EVE, for me, right, is kind of the opposite side of that, which is when you can successfully bait someone into thinking they've, brought the hammer on you. I do that more so in ESSs these days than I do in Citadel fights, but it's the same principle, right? Of just making
it on how
it's free for them.
Most fights, generally, honestly, I think most fights at this point happen. Most big fights is one side mistakenly thinks they have a much larger advantage than they do. They commit, the other side goes, oh, wait, we can actually match this, and goes in as well. And generally, the side initially committing, I would say, thinks they are going to win, but otherwise they wouldn't be committing. Either it's because they have more people, they think they have a better comp. But that's how most fights happen.
At a certain level of FC experience, there will never be a fight unless the fight odds are within like 60%, chance of victory, or a perceived 60% chance of victory for one side, right? Or for both sides, I should say. Like, both sides need to feel that they can win, and have at least a 60 to 40% chance of being able to pull that off. Because if they don't, then they're the incentives in Eve are so, or the disincentives I should say, in Eve are so prohibitive that you can't afford to just like lose every fight over and over and over again. And not only can you not afford it in terms of ISK, but the cost in terms of member morale means that if you take those losing fights over and over again, your members will not show up, and the winning side's members will continue to show up in more and more number, because everybody enjoys when they get a nice big feed fed to them, right? So it creates a situation where if you want fights, the odds have to be at least moderately close uh, to get them.
So I suppose what you're saying is that you kind of need to be the one with a surprise, or at least with more surprises than the other side, because they have to have confidence. They have to have confidence that they have to have reasonable confidence that they've got a good enough chance of beating you. Meaning that you have to have a surprise that they're not expecting. Otherwise, they would have factored that in.
Well,
yeah,
and
that's
usually what happens
every
is both
side's
sides. Usually what happens is both sides have at least one surprise, or one minor force multiplier, and then it's a question of who's got more of them. That plays out the determination of the fight.
And that's why kind of spying in eyes has become crucial. Like, no one generally, if you go take a fight and afterwards someone's like, "Why did you take that fight? You got blobbed." And if you say, "Oh, I didn't have eyes on their staging," they're just going to call you an idiot, because why would you not? And everyone knows where everyone stages now, and everyone has eyes alts there. So you're just kind of expected to know these things and always be taking it into account when taking a fight.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to. Oh, sorry, go on, Murray.
Well, one important thing that I think goes back to the citadels and like mechanics around them, right, that matters here is how long it takes, how long people actually have to be on grid, because that response time is often very relevant for whether people take these like snap decision fights, right? And Metanox has been a very big change there, precisely because you can have these very long bash timers if it's just 4 bombers being annoying, but you can also have these ones that are like 3 minutes long if somebody's just tapping it with like 6 Cernitras and pre-spooling or something like that. Versus like Citadels where like it was I set timer when it happened, and then the next timer is 3 days later and you have time to prepare. Whereas with the Metanox, the timer can be in like 5 hours.
Metanox is also demand the defender actually put stuff on grid initially, which is very different from Citadels.
Well, that touches upon something that I wanted to talk about, and that is the role of the Citadel in the fight occurring over the Citadel. I want to sort of gauge your opinions on that, and I might start by saying that something that I really miss, something that I hugely miss from the pre-Citadel era, is fighting on the undocks of outposts. It's largely something that's gone away now for multiple reasons to do with the balance of the Citadel itself. I mean, just a refresher, and possibly for maybe more than half the people watching, before the Citadels, in nullsec, people might often stage out of an outpost, which was, for all intents and purposes, a station that had a limited set of access for docking and using the services inside. And what that really meant was that one of the key differences is that there was no tether. You could dock if you didn't have a weapons timer, even if you were tackled. And there were no weapons on this structure. This outpost played no role by itself as an asset on the field, which is obviously hugely different these days when Citadels out there, even if they are anti-cap fit, those newts can play havoc with subcaps. They've got a lot of these structures, when they're the right size, have a PDS, which is going to ruin you, or at least make life extremely difficult. They got missiles, they got bombs, they got ECM, and I personally don't see a reason for these Citadel weapons on fighters. I don't see a reasonable reason that these should exist while the Citadel is not under active threat. I mean, does anybody kind of have a differing opinion on that?
I kind of do, because I'm kind of curious about the way in which citadels were created, right? Because it's important to remember that citadels were first introduced to replace POS, which are an armed force on grid, right? So the question is, have we kind of moved forward with EVE Online where we are no longer expecting POS kind of like POS have stayed in the game despite CCP's initial plan to remove them. So then the question becomes, have we accepted that citadels are now going to be stations and POS together, or just stations instead of POS, which they were supposed to be?
They
right?
are.
Yeah, I know that it's very
they
weird.
are. Yeah, they are the best of both worlds plus more.
I would argue that right now, though, they very much more so fill the role of what outposts used to fill more so than they fill the role of POSes.
I don't disagree at all. I don't disagree at all. I'm just like kind of harping back to the reality that I think you should or could have a very effective system of using citadels as outposts, but at the same point, I think there is some need for defensible citadels too, which creates this really awkward kind of middle ground where the current citadels don't work good in either environment.
But Vinny, what I'm asking is defensible under what conditions? Because if you're just a couple of dudes or a small gang or a soloer looking to mess around with people in nullsec, the Citadel is just essentially a perfect safe zone for hundreds of kilometers around it, where if you stray into it.
I don't disagree, but at the same time,
people in nullsec managed before.
POS does the exact same thing, right?
Yeah, but people didn't live in a POS.
But we did used to live in POS at one point.
No. But you're talking about like 2005.
I think Phantomite's trying to compare more to when people lived out of outposts. And you'd get station games and stuff like that happening on the undocks because, sure, the people who live there still have an advantage in that they have access to the outpost, so they can play the station undock games. They can suddenly just be in a different ship, but they don't have any direct combat advantage coming from the outpost itself. I think that's what Phantomite is trying to get at.
I might rephrase it.
He wants Citadels to be in that sort of state.
I might rephrase it even simpler as, in the past, if it was a structure that someone lived in, i.e. an outpost, then they defended their space by undocking ships and aggressing.
Yeah, 100%.
Whereas with a Citadel, you can repel the small attacks without any risk whatsoever.
I mean, that's kind of true, but on the same token, like a small gang would never spend the time, or basically never spend the time to reinforce, like, what did it used to be, 25 million HP on the Citadels, or the old stations?
No, but defending your space is also repelling the people who are roaming through it, even if they're a small gang, not just people who are attacking the physical infrastructure.
But if, like, say, for example, right, like, the people in the Citadel just docked up, and the people in the outpost just docked up, which is essentially the situation you're describing, right? Because the only other quote-unquote defense is defending the Citadel grid, which the small gangers don't care about or aren't doing anything on, regardless, for, like, actual staging Citadels, which is what outposts were. And so the fundamental difference there is pretty narrow, right? Like, oh, I want to, like, get these people out of my space. The outpost versus a Citadel kind of doesn't matter for that, because I would need to go fight them somewhere else anyway if they're, like, gate camping.
Yeah, but you could put people, if people didn't want to fight, if people didn't want to undock their ships and defend, with an outpost, you could stop them from doing whatever it is that they wanted to do. You could bubble them in. You can't really do that on a Citadel. The Citadel is defending itself rather than the defender being asked to put a ship in harm's way.
I don't think there's a big difference between that and just, like, camping the outgates in that system.
I think there's a huge difference in that. I mean, I think it's a pretty obvious huge difference. Being out and ready, or being in the station and not ready, except you can't sit there on their doorstep saying, I'm not letting you out.
I'm just doing that on the gate instead of on the Citadel undock.
It doesn't, yeah, but people can still get out. People can undock and jump out to a Sino. They could go to a. Go on, sorry, say again, Redline.
I'm asking, are you campaigning to lock people in a Citadel Like, is that what you're trying
No,
to
I'm
do
asking
again?
people if they want to come out and there's some elite nanogangers covered in snakes and A-type invulns and long webs. I'm asking for the people, if they want to undock, they should fight their way out like they used to.
Like, Brainstraw has an actual point about a way in which people could be forced to undock with, like, forcing, like, damage to the station in some way. Which would be...
Yeah, because you could use it on reinforced services.
Yeah, but to reinforce... Let's imagine a world where we bring shootable services back to citadels, which, I mean, I don't think anyone's against that.
I think it'd be great, personally.
Yeah. If we brought back shootable services on a citadel, you would be within range of the citadel's weapons.
You would indeed.
I mean, as much as, you know, like, I don't know what you guys remember of shootable services, but it was not exactly some, like, I think people remember this with kind of rose-tinted glasses. Like, all that would happen, people would shoot your services, they would leave, you would repair them 10 minutes later, and that would be it. Like, it wasn't...
Fine, they undocked. They undocked a ship to do it.
It's true. That's the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, but like what I'm saying is that like not much content happened. Like it didn't create content because people like they undocked, they repaired their services. You came back, they docked again. You know, you shot the service more. You left, they undocked again, they repaired. Like, you know, like you're doing something to them, I guess, but like it just did not create a very entertaining gameplay loop, I guess would be the way to say it.
I'm not trying to tell you that in the pre-Citadel era, you would turn up as a small gang in nullsec and everybody would undock and feed their ratting ships to you. I'm saying it was an option. Nothing in EVE has ever been guaranteed for a fight, but to have eliminated it as one source of combat in the game is, you know, quite sad.
Well, there are plenty of ways for a small game to get content in nullsec, though, like ESSs, of course, hunting down ratting ships, stuff like that. Like, they don't have to participate in everything, right? Because citadels are more
I don't
for
want
like
to kill ratting ships, and I don't want to go to the designated PvP zone.
Well, then get some more friends and go structure bash if you want to. It's really boring, but if that's what you want to do, go have fun, I guess.
I mean, to Redline's point, there are a lot of different grids where you can get people to fight you for their resources, right? In a way that's more substantial than annoying them on the undock, right? You can go and hit a Merc Den. You can steal from a Skyhook. You can go through the ESS. And like those avenues to me seem much less annoying as a mechanic.
What do you mean less annoying? Which alternative mechanic is more annoying?
Just to clarify for a sec, what is the goal we're seeking? To get more people in space or to get more fights?
Are they not one and the same?
I don't think...
They are absolutely not one and the same.
I think Phantomite just wants to reinvent the wheel at this point. But I would like to see more people in space. Like, I would like different battlefields, aside from citadels in general.
Okay.
Well, I think the reason people want different battlefields from citadels is because fighting on a citadel has become very, I don't want to say solved, because it's not solved, but it's very stale. It's, you know exactly what you're getting ahead of time. The citadel, depending on its fit and what you brought, either is super giga annoying and a massive issue the whole fight, or it's completely irrelevant and can't do anything to your fleet, and it's completely black and white in that case.
I'll tell you one thing
and that's
it. Is the fighting on a citadel grid within range of the weapons of a citadel, especially with obviously fortizars and up to, you know, large and extra large structures, is that the neuting alone is something that really narrows your available set of ships that you could fly. Like, for example, you're not going to want to fly. You're not really going to want to be flying a bunch of nightmares within neut range of a citadel for an extended period of time. I mean, I know that nightmares for an extended period of time is a bit of an oxymoron, but I think...
I have done that, and it's been fine, because nightmares in that scenario should be having 3 or 4 cat bases with them to top people up. And the Citadel likely only has at most 3 neuts or so.
Okay.
Unless they've really giga changed their fit.
And the bombs are no longer the same problem they used to be.
Yeah, and that's the situation where, because you decide to bring this specific comp, and that's what they fit their structure with, that the structure suddenly just kind of becomes irrelevant to the fight. which sucks for the defenders. And then you have other situations where if I want to take a fight on anti-cap Fortizar with caps, then suddenly the structure is the most important part of that fight in terms of the output for the defenders. And it's a very black and white sort of issue where either the Citadel is useless or it is the most valuable piece on the grid for the defenders, and there's no in between.
Something that's always amused me about the design of Citadels is the anti-capital nature that you can fit on even a lot of medium structures to cause problems to dreads, for example. I mean, there was a
you're losing a
time...
cap to a medium structure. You've done something horribly wrong.
Nonetheless,
after the nerfs they got,
the point is that given that the purpose of a dread, one of its purposes is shooting other capitals, another major purpose is bashing structures. For the structure to make it a really high barrier of entry to be able to fit and use your dreads to do that in smaller than I've got 500 people type fleets, it doesn't seem it seems a bit off. I mean, we used to drop dreads to reinforce poses, for example, and it was generally quite rare that poses would be dread poppers.
Yeah, I would say that's a big difference, but that mostly, I would say that only comes into effect at the Fortizar and up level. And Fortizar specifically can still be tanked by dreads with very specific long range fits, but yeah, you do get to the point where they do have such high damage anti-cap output that fielding caps on grid with them is an instant, not say instant loss, but instant huge disadvantage for you.
I really like that aspect of Fortizars, which is maybe a hot take, but the ability of Fortizars, when properly fit, to say no, you actually, if you want to shoot this, you do have to bring subcaps, is quite useful when you consider that Fortizars are the primary staging citadel for a lot of smaller groups. And if I want to try and force fights or enable fights under potentially larger groups of capitals that I can't compete with, the Fortizar is the answer to that.
It's
yes, but the Fortizar is also used by larger groups who can, if being attacked by, for example, a smaller group who would normally use caps to make up for the disadvantage, it is also used to entirely deny that.
I mean, you're not wrong, but like there is a price to pay on both sides, right? There's a give and a take. But like the more interesting question is, do we agree or disagree that Citadel should provide the defender some innate advantages? Or do they? Is there a case to be made that like, that is, I think,
because I think there's somewhere in between. I think I would say yes, it should provide a defense, but only within a little more narrow conditions than it does now. So what I'm asking for is for Citadel weaponry to only be active when the Citadel is under threat to the structure itself. And I know that there's a lot of talk that could be had about how do you define when it's under attack.
The opposite?
And go on.
What if
you think the weapon shouldn't work when it's being shot?
Well, I think that you should be able to hack the services on a Citadel, right? And of course you're going to be within weapons range, but if you bring the right ships and you're coming someplace to do that specifically, you can survive it just fine. But say you could disable some services, like you could disable tether, and unlike before where you could just go back and repair it, this day and age, in 2025, a mechanic like that would have it disabled for at least a number of hours, somewhere between 12 and 24. So it would make
conjecture.
Well, I mean, that's what... Yeah, whatever. But it would make it so that, people would actually have to come out and defend that against the small gangs. Now, when people do come out and defend it with, 200 hacks or whatever, you're going to complain about that too. So just... keep that in mind. It's small gangs very much complain about that too.
Well, I think that any small ganger who complains that another group is larger than them is extremely stupid. Perhaps there are things to say about the mobility of the 200 when it comes to projection and things like that, but that's another topic.
He said the magic word. Oh!
I definitely... if we're going to say that any small ganger who complains about the outside having more numbers is being dumb, then that's all of them.
I mean, yes.
I mean,
that is correct, exactly.
in the chat,
Fuck small games.
in the chat, people have been bringing up perhaps the next one of perhaps the biggest things that exists about Citadels, and that is Tether, the very nature of Tether, what it allows people to do.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any comment on that, or did you want me to get started?
Just imagine if your Citadel was in structure, it didn't offer Tether at all. Would there ever be another?
I mean, if it's in structure, then that is a big fight that's occurring. This isn't anything to do with before that.
Most people are fighting armor timer anyway, so that's kind of irrelevant.
Right. Would there ever be
and also, like, Tether was very clearly made by CCP because they wanted a mechanic like pause shields, but they didn't want all the buggy hell that happened with pause shields, and this was their solution. And it's not a great compromise, but I think that's what they were going for, and I think we kind of have to acknowledge that if we want to get rid of or change Tether, that the goal is
what is wrong
kind of to approximate that.
Well, I think that there's some language that we can use for that. Then that is that Citadels essentially serve two purposes that were previously split between outposts and stations and POSes. Outposts and stations were a place to live, and POSes were a place to stage on a Titan in the system you're fighting in, getting ready before you warp into the fight, that kind of thing. Whereas Citadels offer both of those solutions in one. They are a place to live, you can put your ships and your stuff there, and you can dock and log off there. They offer a place to stage, tethered on your Titan, that kind of thing. And something that's come up repeatedly is, and it came up in chat here, is that, and I think this is a great idea, Tether should be a module, and I believe that should be a capital ship only high slot module paired with a module fitted on the Citadel. I don't think that subcaps should be able to tether.
Why?
Because when you tether, it gives you, there's so many reasons. Tethering gives you a hundreds of kilometers across sphere where you can choose where to become vulnerable while having complete freedom to fly around. Tether allows you to stage with no risk whatsoever.
So with freedom to move around and position, like you also have freedom to
That's
move around
massive.
And position. It's really not.
No. As somebody who is hostile to that Citadel, you do not have the same ability on that Citadel to choose where you become vulnerable.
You're right, you don't, because it's not your Citadel. But like, if you think about it, like what happened way back in the day in X-47, and it's all I can think about right now, but they used Tether as a defensive mechanic by like disengaging the Titans that were being targeted to try to get them tethered before they could be targeted again. That kind of use of Tether is bad, but being able to pick and choose where you engage on a grid, on your own Citadel grid, is perfectly fine.
I'm not sure where this kind of entitlement of I should be able to move within a 400 kilometer diameter sphere around my Citadel where I become vulnerable.
Well, because
where this comes from, given that it never existed in the first place.
That's their 400 kilometers,
and
dude.
in POSes, with POSes, when you were safe, when you were inside the shields, the equivalent of tethered when it comes to safety, you couldn't fire outwards.
But to be fair, you could exit the pause shield at whatever location you chose. Like, it was a very common thing to, start a fight on one side of the pause, go through the pause, and exit the pause on the other side of the force field.
Yes.
So that you now had a range advantage. Like, so there is a similar thing.
Yes, but the difference it may well be similar, but
in a lot of ways.
Go on, sorry.
The pause is better at that than a Citadel in a lot of ways, because
you
can do it aggressed,
your fleet can still be tangled up, and you'll lose a bunch of people in a way that going immediately invulnerable as soon as you hit the shield would not.
One huge difference there, though, that you're not considering is that within a pause shield, you can choose anywhere within that sphere. You can't choose anywhere from within the sphere to become vulnerable. On a Citadel grid, you've got the entire volume of that sphere to choose where to become vulnerable as well.
Also, pause shields are nowhere near the size of the docking radiuses on Citadels. Docking radius on Citadels.
It's a fraction.
Overall, I'd argue.
Fraction.
Overall, I'd argue that the docking rings should be brought in on every Citadel by at least half their current radius because it's insane how big they are.
To be clear, the POS, a large POS is roughly the same as an Astra House. But yes, there is nothing comparable to a Fortizar, and especially not a Keepstar.
The largest POS is comparable to the smallest size class of Citadels.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfectly fine, because the investment for a Fortizar and a Keepstar...
The investment for a Fortizar is pennies. The investment for a Fortizar is pennies, dude.
So then
what are you
buy
talking
one,
about?
anchor some more. Like, that's
So
the
I
thing.
think
we do. What are you talking about?
So, as someone who's probably lost more Keepstars and killed more Keepstars than the rest here, like I think this is an interesting dynamic, because I think this is actually one of the fundamental things that maybe Keepstars and Fortizars just don't cost enough. Like I know it's not like
honestly, I can agree with that, because they're maybe Keepstars are generally only spammable for the biggest groups. But if you have any amount of ISK making in this game, farming the ISK for Fortizar is not hard. It is not expensive for any group that would be anchoring one.
Well, especially with the amount of force, force projection, force multiplication they provide, I guess would be the way to say it. I think Keepstar should be in the range of almost double what they currently are, and Fortizars probably even more than double what they currently are. If I had to like
right now, most fitted Fortizars are cheaper than 2 faction dreads.
Properly fitted Fortizar is like 23 bill, right? I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, a fitted faction dread right now, fitted Zern is going to be running around 11 bill. That's 2 of them.
Okay, well, I was thinking like a faction, Navy Rev at like 8 was kind of what I was thinking, but yeah, that makes sense.
But then that's still super cheap.
Can we say 3? Just say 3 for the sake of
3, sure.
Still,
what would you rather have in a fight? A properly fitted Fortizar or 3 dreads? Personally, I'm taking the properly fitted Fortizar all day, every day.
Sure, but you can only get 1 Fortizar in a grid, or 1 Fortizar in a fight grid, I guess would be the way to say it. But yeah, and much the same like when you talk about Keepstars and Titans, right? Where, one Keepstar, Titans are currently one singular Titan is currently significantly more expensive than a single Keepstar, right? Which is
you need to talk. You need to talk to my Titan guy. I'll get you a better deal.
I don't know. A properly, a fully fitted out Keepstar, including core, is like 240 right now. And most Titans are like 260 with fit right now, based on current mineral prices, which are another issue that plays into this all together, right? So, yeah.
I think more expensive, particularly the Fortizar. Asbels are not actually that scary. And then the
Asbels are so much less powerful in terms of.
Yeah, I wouldn't factor it into the conversation here. It's not usually the strategic. It's not on the same strategic level, I guess.
More expensive is fine.
Also,
it's kind of
is this something we can all agree on? Maybe we should just not have fucking plates on Fortizars and Citadel. Like, this plate should just go away, period. Is there anyone that thinks fucking plates are a good idea?
If you get rid of the plates, isn't the only low slot module you're going to be a damage at more damage?
I'll make an argument for plates. Plates exist solely because Citadels can't be repped. Because as it is now, if you're fighting on a fort and your enemy is just like, we're going to spam 200 kilometers away, so if you're sitting at the center, they're probably 500 kilometers away from you, and we're just going to constantly feed you and shoot the thing until it dies. Plates are the only way you can buy yourself more time to save it. And I think there should be a way in the game for defenders to buy themselves more time in that way, but plates are a really unfun way to do it, but they also are the only way to do it right now.
I mean, yeah, they are the only way to do it, but you know what happens? 90% of the time plates are used, 99% of the time plates are used, is just to fuck over the people attacking the structures. So, it's like, oh, you guys thought you were here for 24 minutes? Congrats, you're here for 50 minutes. Have fun, bitches. Like, that's what plates do currently.
I think it's much better if you could extend, in the same way of, say, fitting 4 plates to a Fortizar, you could extend the time an attacker has to exist on grid, but to do so would require you to, have a... let's just say it won't work by normal wrapping mechanics, but field a certain amount of faxes and have them do a thing to the structure to get that benefit. But I do think if you get rid of plates, if you get rid of plates, you still need some way for defenders to have that. Otherwise, to be realistic, defending a Fortizar against a group above a certain size becomes impossible to save the structure. Just straight up, you can never save the structure. If
I don't feel like
that's
Space
kind of been a thing before Citadels as well. Like, you know, if you were defending a pause or an outpost, if there's too many of the enemy, then you're going to lose it. Even if
but you can wrap the pause.
I don't feel like there has ever been a significant number. I don't think in like all of history of Citadels there's been a significant number of forts. I'm not saying there's none, but like I don't think there's been many battles that the fight outcome has been changed by the reality of plates.
I would strongly disagree with that.
Here's
Sure,
a hot take.
like
what if you completely removed the mechanic of damaging a citadel and instead replaced it with hacking, and you had to take over it? Huh? No more explosions. You just own the Fortizar now. How about that?
Oh dear.
No? Horrible idea?
I mean,
come on and toast this Citadels, boys. Let's go.
Oh dear. There's a lot of extra baggage that comes with that idea.
You're fired.
Of course there is. But I do think that it would be cool to have a way to remove the mechanics that you're complaining about temporarily. Like hack the structure to remove tether for 12 hours.
But the thing is, I suppose, I mean, that would just mean it was... And I don't... is this a good or a bad thing?
If that was an ability to out like Old hack. Yeller, please, bro. I can't.
if hacking services on a Citadel was a thing as a replacement for shooting services on outposts, then would it not always be a foregone conclusion in any large fight? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I would say that would be I think that would be a bad thing, especially because if you just tied it to hacking, then it goes from, hey, I need to field an actual combat ship for a couple minutes at least in order to RF this, do enough damage to this service for it to stop, to, hello, here's my 50 mil frigate, pop it in 5-10 seconds, or lol, your tether's gone for 24 hours.
I mean, I know that what we're all waiting for is for Nova to be resurrected so that we can land people playing on their Xbox One X on the side of it, and they cut their way in and start running through the corridors, right? That's the real.
Have you played Vanguard recently?
I mean, the immediate frustration I would see would primarily come from the fact that I'm used to operating in groups that primarily have a single time zone, right? And so, you know, our Citadel's getting hit by some people who can field a fleet in 2 time zones, and they just turned off all our services in EUTZ, and now we're sitting here without tether on the actual timer, and there was just nothing we could do about it, right? There was no real counterplay to that if it's some like arbitrary timer that it's disabled for.
I would say if we're gonna have them turn it off for like the fight, I would personally want it to be done as if you want to turn off tether, it's a thing that becomes available for you to do the moment it comes out of reinforce. So it's a thing I have to do when the fight starts or right before the fight starts. So it would have to be done in the time zone of the defender before you fight them. Because I agree, it would be bad.
Do we want to talk about reinforcement timers versus vulnerability? It's not called vulnerability windows. Set times on time zone tanking on Citadels as what we're going into here.
No such thing as time zone tanking these days, Phantomite.
I mean, you know, I very much feel like Stront levels in a pause determining when it would come out was a pretty good thing because it was gameable by both sides, whereas time zone tanking is exclusively gameable by the defender.
I have no interest in being terminally online to shuffle Stront around.
Yeah, I don't.
That's why you're part of a larger organization, so that you can share that workload out.
I don't think going to like a POS setup with Stront is a better way of doing it. I would argue for maybe widening the window that a Citadel comes out and giving, for example, the attacker some control over where it comes out. So say someone's timed their structure for USTZ, and it has a plus-minus 3-hour window is how it works right now. And if you made it so, for example, if I RF it in EUTZ, it's more likely to roll on the side of the timer that is towards EUTZ. Would give both sides a bit of an ability, but I think if you made the Stront thing or force people to be online all the time, that's much worse.
It's not about forcing people to be online all the time. It's about sort of if you wanted to head off for the night, and you are a group with 100 people, with 200 people, with 1,000 people, whatever, then how hard is it to assign somebody to go and set the timer by taking some Stront out?
But what benefit
in case they attack in the dead of the night?
The problem is it just becomes busy work for random logistics guys, and it just it's I hate to say it, it's not fun for those people. And I've been one of those.
No, I don't disagree, Villy, but every single one of us has our limit in how much work we put into this game. Would this not just would this not set the new limit, and so people wouldn't maintain as many structures if they couldn't be bothered to handle them all?
What benefit do you think is going to come to the game from making people time them with Stront? What benefit does it actually bring to fights?
Say again, sorry.
If you do this change so that, say, Citadels now work on pause timing, you have to have a certain amount of Stront. What benefit does that actually have?
It means that if you can't be bothered to look after 100, but you can be bothered to look after 10, you're going to have 10 rather than a spam of 100.
No, so what benefit does it have when I hit a structure? Is the benefit that if I hit a structure they forgot about, I get it in a different time than they wanted?
They might not bother changing it, and so it gives you the opportunity. And I know how lame this sounds, but we all used to do it, right? Getting 4 guys to alarm clock to one cycle something.
But
I'm good, thanks.
So that it would come out at a good time for a fight, rather than time zone tanking it when nobody's around.
But I just don't think that's what you're going to get out of it. If you make that change so that it has to work by Stront,
except we did get
more likely, if you do this to Citadels, I think it's just more likely that you're just going to end up, I screwed up my Stront timer, I guess I'm just not going to bother fighting, and we'll try to get it better on the next timer. I think it'd be way better to give the attacker some control over when it rolls, based on biasing the roll within the time zone tank towards when the attacker attacked it.
I think that's a reasonable in between.
I really want
that doesn't require busy work from the defender. It still gives both sides a control, and it's more likely to put the timer in a position of, hey, wow, both of us can show up at this time.
I really that's what you want. Up on Nuke's point here, but in a slightly different situation. While I think it is somewhat useful in Citadel windows, it is much more important for Entosis, because Entosis already has wider windows, and it would be extremely helpful for fighting over Sov if the Entosis timer came out when you RF'd it and not somewhere in the window. Because when you only have a few hour crossover in which the two groups will be willing to fight each other over those timers, and the windows are anywhere that's kind of wide, suddenly you only get a fight on 1 out of every 6 Entosis RFs as opposed to every single one, and it's absolutely awful.
I think overall, every timer in the game would benefit from having that sort of the roll gets biased towards when I RF'd it. It's still within their set window, but biased towards when I tried to shoot it. Overall, I think that would just lead to more fights.
How could that possibly lead to more fights if you're taking the fight out of the defender's time zone and putting it in yours?
But the thing is, Redline, hold on. As many times as somebody is using time zone tanking to make sure it happens in their time zone, huge numbers of people are using time zone tanking to do it when nobody, not even themselves.
Redline, I don't think you actually understood what was said. What I said was, if I am RFing someone's structure that is in EUTZ, that's set for USTZ, and I RF it in EUTZ, it's still going to roll in the window they set. It's just going to roll on the side of the window that's closer to when I RF'd it.
I see.
Yeah. And
so the defenders still get it in their window. It's just where in the window I have more control over as the attacker, rather than it being completely random.
It's a huge win for everyone involved, because you don't need to suddenly re-ref things multiple times in order to get a fight, which means the defenders don't have to repeatedly form and waste time. The attackers don't have to repeatedly form to hit it to waste time. And suddenly everyone's wasting less time and you get more fights.
Yeah, because after the first week, any structures that survive, I'm just going to move the window back. Further away from it.
It doesn't move the window, Redline.
No, that's what I'm going to do to my structure if you're attacking it. I'm just
so you're going to move it out of your own TZ.
Yeah, why not?
So then So if you're a USCZ group and you move
towards
it
when
even
you're
further back,
attacking it, then you're going to attack it in EUTZ, then I can just game it that way. It's fixable within a week.
so then you're putting yourself further. It's then you're actually not just then you're going into full time zone tank where you're putting it into a window where you can't show up, and you're hoping that no one else can. Because then if you do that, you put it super far and some AUTZ group attacks it. None of your guys are going to be able to show up in USTZ anymore because it rolled entirely into AU and you screwed yourself over.
I mean, people
Why
will
would it
set
roll
their
entirely
structures
into AU?
appropriately. People will set their structures appropriate to the time zone in which the balance of their strength versus their enemy's strength is the best. That is just human nature, right? If I can get 10 guys in one time zone, 8 in one time zone, and 2 in one zone, and you can get, 5, 5, and 5, then I'm going to go for that 10, right? But, like, people are just going to do what's in their best interest. Nobody's necessarily
Absolutely. I'm just arguing for a way in which, if both sides act in their own best nature, the timer is more likely to end up in the time they both show up than it is now, and that's just a benefit to everyone if that's how it works. Because
right. But what I'm saying is that the fight is not in the best interest of the defender. Usually, what's in the best interest of the defender, because they've invested in that structure, is the survival of the structure, not the fight.
Yes, and for the structure to survive, it's in their best interest for it to roll when they can show up. So if they want to,
well, once again, it's not in their best interest to control when they can show up. It's in their best interest for it to roll when their strength is strongest versus the enemy's attacking weakest, right? Which is the point Redline was making.
Yeah.
Yes, but I just think if
the best time for me to set my structure is the time that you're not going to come attack it a second time. Basically, is what I'm saying.
Right, but as it is now,
that's a point. Redline's point.
It's a 6-hour window as it is right now, and even if you move it, say you're like, oh wow, you're in a UT super cracking me, and because this changed, I need to move it 2 hours back, and you do that. That's still a better situation than it is now because it's still going to be a better timer for me because it was a 6-hour window before. If it rolled on the whole other end, I still would have had no chance of attacking it. So you moving it 2 hours back. That's still overall a better change than it was before. So sure, everyone can do that.
I guess. I don't agree. I just think it's a one-time thing that maybe causes some structures to die, but overall isn't the change that you're looking for.
I mean, I don't understand. It's just the math of 6 hours versus a 2-hour shift. I don't know what you're disagreeing with. Do you not think that 6 is greater than 2?
I do, but I think that there's a better way to do what you're talking about doing. I just don't know what it is. See, that's the thing, is I don't know what the good way is. I just know that this isn't the good way.
I know you don't.
This is the good way, and you don't have a better way.
I think your desire is in the correct place. Redline.
Where's my desire?
I don't know what his desire. His desire is apparently for no fights.
No.
His desire was, I want this. Here's a solution that won't get a fight.
I mean, 6 hours variance is a very broad amount of time to ask of any time zone to be able to form a formidable force.
Yeah, which is why how it is now is where timers are set is pretty centralized. If you're
USCZ,
you set it right in the middle of the USCZ because that gives you the best shot of actually being able to show up to it.
And one of the nice things...
Would the most simple yet minor changes be just adjusting the window from 6 hours to 8 hours? Like, instead of +3 being +4 per side?
No, I think that would be worse, honestly. Because then it becomes even more of a game of, if I'm in EUTZ, sure, there's now a better chance if it rolls really close to me, but now if it rolls really far away from me, it's even worse. So it becomes even more of a game of me attacking it, bad roll, blue ball, attack it again, bad roll, blue ball, attack it again. Oh, now's a good roll. Now I'll show up on armor timer. And that's shitty gameplay.
And the wider the window goes, the bigger the risk, too, that, like, you just have attackers constantly rolling timers for the one that they, like, know they can win, right? It's like, oh, you have this 8-hour window, but, like, part of that window is, like, EU prime or something. And so I'm just going to roll until I hit EU prime, and you have no shot of defending this.
Versus if it was
an narrower window, but you get to control when it is in that window. The defender, it benefits by virtue of it being a narrower window. They know they can defend any time in that window. And the attacker is more confident that they can actually attack in that window without having to do a ton of bullshit, because when they hit that citadel, the timer will roll closest to when they hit it.
Yeah. I think that's what that silence means.
It might be time to move on to the next topic. I think you're right.
It might be, yeah. I mean, before we talk about a topic about FCing, there are so many subjects around citadels, right? From their weapons to their timers to their modules to their abilities. Did anybody want to touch upon proliferation? Is that a problem? How much of a problem is it?
Of what?
Of
proliferation
citadels.
Of what? Of citadels?
Citadels specifically in Sov Null, for example.
Nah.
I mean, it's not as bad as it has been.
Yeah, that's true.
with abandonment, coring, and then only a single timer roll on mediums, you don't see like Citadel spam like people used to call it. Like
I think some of the things where
it's not.
I totally agree that it's not nearly as much of a problem. I mean, obviously, they're still spammable. If someone decides, oh, I want to put down 100 Asher houses, there's no way that they obviously can. But I think the mechanics do a good job of discouraging it. The only thing I would personally like to see would be fuel bays on citadels not being infinite. They don't need. They should be as small as passes are, but not infinite. I think would be good. Maybe say they can fit 3 months of fuel at a time. Passes can fit, I think, a month. Instead of currently, I can go fuel a citadel for 2 years and I don't have to pay attention to it anymore.
Okay. Well, we do have a request in the chat to move on. Saying that this topic has
move on from citadels entirely. Okay,
I reckon so. Yeah. So I wanted to the other day, about a week ago, I was thinking about balances of power, largely in nullsec, in large fleet situations when it came to personalities. I mean, I think if I was to say that every single successful group in EVE Online, small to large, is essentially, and not necessarily in a bad way, like the word might imply, every single successful group in EVE is a cult of personality around one or very few people compared to the size of the group. And something that we used to have a lot more in large fleet groups is that the cult of personality would be centered around the FCs, the political power, the alliance decision-making power used to rest a lot heavier with the FCs than with people who were just basically pure managers. And I certainly feel that these days, like as an outsider to nullsec politics, that what I hear about now is management when it comes to people who are leading these groups, rather than FCs having the following that they used to have and the political push within those groups. Is that something that kind of sounds true to the rest of you?
Well, what's the difference between the two?
Well, a manager doesn't. Somebody who's not an FC who is managing a group has a very different set of incentives to somebody whose incentives are direct fighting themselves and building a name for themselves that way.
I would say that maybe, but I don't know. I feel like even back in I've never been in massive nullsec groups, so if I am completely off base, I'm sure Billy can tell me. But it wasn't like every single well-known figure in old nullsec was an FC as well. Some of them would be one of other things, and even now, I don't think the incentives between an alliance lead who is an FC and an alliance lead who isn't an FC, I don't think the incentives are as misaligned as you might think they are, because at the end of the day, what FCs want is to get fights and get people in seats to fight, right? And what an alliance lead wants is as many people in the alliance logging in and playing as they can, and either because they want to make the routing ISK or just because their vision of the alliance being help these people logging in. Those two incentives are not that different.
It's, if you look at sort of who would speak for large groups in the past, it would be the people who you would hear on comms directly being the actual on-the-grid FC. But these days, even when it comes to groups like Snuff, for example, it's not anywhere close to the same frequency of hearing people talk for the group and direct the group, who are the ones on the field.
I mean,
I think that's just the game got older, and a lot of the people who, the leadership of Eve hasn't changed. Everyone who's in leadership has been an FC. Some of them are just less active because they have IRL stuff now. Everyone got old.
I remember that, people the membership of a group used to look up to their leader, and that used to be the fleet commander.
Are there any groups in mind that you're thinking of that have this structure that you dislike?
Oh, yeah, Imperium.
Manager? Well, Asher is an FC. He's the person who's in charge of the Imperium. Well, how often is a different story, but he started as an FC and continues as an FC today.
To be clear, I'm not a big fan of Asher as an FC, but there's no doubt he is an FC. And the reality is, if you want to be a good alliance leader, that means you can't be an FC as much, right? Like, you're spending, if you get let's say 6 hours a day to play Eve, which is probably the bare minimum for an alliance leader level. If you're doing 5 hours of admin a day and 1 hour of FC a day, that's still probably not enough admin, right? Like, the reality is, if you want to have your large alliance run successfully, you have to be Administrator Asher, not fucking FC Asher. Like, it just doesn't work.
But you can see how that really changes the incentives.
But I don't think it does. I don't think the incentives are that different.
Then why do we have this culture in large null groups of a sort of subclass of FCs who get hauled before management and yelled at when they lose a fight?
Which ones? Do you know?
That's basically all of the large groups.
If this is Imperium,
I think it is.
So let's be clear here. That's a different problem than what you were talking about, because that is. I know I spent a lot of time working on it in my olden days, trying to get people comfortable with losing fights, and it also takes a mental shift for the leadership themselves with letting yourself be comfortable with other people losing, right? Because a lot of the tendency sometimes is.
But why is that layer there now that didn't used to be there? That layer of people who we need to culture shift away from. Why is that there now when it was the FCs who were at the top before?
But I think you're mixing up who's doing it. I think if you're in a group and you're getting shit on for losing a fight, there's a solid chance from people above you in the leadership structure. There's a solid chance the person above you shitting on you was also an FC. It's not like FCs are magically not doing this either. It's not. That's not the issue.
And to be clear, sometimes you can't let your FCs lose. We were talking before the show for a second about, or maybe in the early part of the show about fights taking requiring a certain evenness to win, right? But if you let a certain FC feed every day for a month, that could very well kill your entire alliance, right? It doesn't sound like much, but when you feed hard enough, lots of the sharks will arrive to feast on the kills, right? And that can literally kill your alliance. So
I would even take it to a less extreme. If I have an FC who's coming up in Snuff, who hasn't FC'd much before, and he's taking out fleets for smaller fights or something, and he starts feeding hard, I am going to counsel him and be like, hey, you got to stop feeding this hard. Not because I'm worried it's going to kill the alliance, but because people are going to stop showing up to that FC's fleets. If every time they go on this dude's fleets, they just die and don't get to kill anything, people stop showing up to his pings.
Yeah, and for smaller alliances, sometimes they don't have the funds for SRP either.
Yeah, it's from the, even if there's times where you might counsel an FC to stop doing that, not because I'm worried about the alliance, but because I think it's the best thing for his development as an FC to start being more careful about what fights he's taking, because otherwise he's going to ruin his own reputation in the alliance as an FC.
It was a lot nicer in the past to have the FCs be in charge, so that their failure could finally take these alliances apart.
I think that there's only really one group that isn't actively run by an FC that I can think of, and that's Horde. Because I don't think Gobbin's actively FCs. But Horde also.
Did he ever FC in the past? I think he did.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure, but I know that
Gobbins is a multiple time alliance tournament pilot.
Yeah.
He used to FC lots back in the early days of Horde.
Yeah.
Gobbins has got no shortage of credibility.
But like everybody else in that little fam umbrella, like NC, I believe, is run by FCs, right? Vince still FCs, doesn't he? Does he? I don't know.
I don't know, but there's no doubt that Vince has definitely done no shortage of FCing either in his day, right?
I know Riot Rick runs Slice, and he's at the head of the Procure fleets. Every time there's one going out, he's in charge of it.
If Riot Rick is not the one FCing the Slice fleet, you do not need to worry about the Slice fleet.
Apparently, Test is run by ChatGPT, which I guess counts. ChatGPT
but can ChatGPT FC?
Probably better than a lot of FCs in Null currently, I would imagine. Yeah.
So they still count as being run by an FC then, so we still haven't found the group.
Right. Well, no, we know that... I mean, if Phantomite is talking about, like, current FCing, that's different.
Well, I mean...
But, like, there's a point when you graduate, you know?
But here's an interesting question, Redline. Like, when Goons were run by the Mittani, who was not an FC and never was an FC, were they, worse or better? Because, like, Mittani was a fantastic administrator, and he certainly had no inability to let his, FCs off the leash, right? Like, Goons were perhaps their most warlike when they had an administrative leader.
A force to be reckoned with, for sure. Definitely, today they are a shadow of their former selves without that kind of leadership.
I don't know. I don't know that I would call an era of Goons when they expected everybody to come and feed to them as their entire fleet PvP lifestyle to be an aggressive era.
Which era are we talking about? Like,
we didn't say it was aggressive.
2016?
We just said it was their best.
But that's a huge period of time in which case, and you can't say that Goons didn't do anything aggressive during those 10 years.
Delve pre the fall of and departure of the Mittani.
I mean, they glassed, what was it, like Pure
Blind? Glassing
tribute?
Campaign is not war.
Okay, so
it is a glassing campaign.
It's a war if you bring all your Titans and then you beat the other group's Titan fleet and then they leave.
And it's aggressive.
Delve pre-Mittani leaving wasn't even the majority of his time as Goon lead, though. You can't just look at that.
Like 2016 onward, you can make an argument that Goons didn't do much, but on the other hand, they were also to some degree rebuilding from World War B1. And they certainly conducted some aggressive campaigns towards X-47 in the north at the same time as the Extinction War, right? So, but on the other hand, what I was more referencing was, things like the Halloween War, things like the Fountain War, things like what were we doing in 2011? I can't remember now. But like, there's no shortage of times when Goons have been hyper aggressive in the campaigns that they were chosen when they were under an administrative leader.
I think I understand why you're coming at this, Phantomite, because you're kind of trying to get at why are null blocks risk averse now. But I don't think it has to do with who's at the helm. I think the fact you see leaders of groups being less personally active as FCs is simply because groups have gotten so big that the management burden on the top leadership is so high that they just don't have time. Even in a smaller group like Snuff, which, I'm going to call it a small... I know we're big for LoSec, but a smaller group compared to these nullsec groups. When I went from being an FC to being a director and having to do admin stuff, I straight up just didn't have as much time as I used to do FC stuff. And that's just how it happens. That's just the reality of the game right now.
Well, I mean, it's going to be the reality of the game basically forever, I imagine. As long as you have large-scale group organization, like, just managing people is an infinitely painful process, right? Like, and you can't... If your organization is going to run effectively, you have to spend an inordinate amount of time doing it. Even if you have good levels of delegation, it's not going to go away. Then you have to delegate, or you have to manage the delegators, right? Like,
it's a growing overhead as the group grows.
Yeah, and I think that's a completely separate problem to null blocks being risk averse, because that's realistically, honestly, I would personally argue that having a non-FC at the helm who listens to the FC team below him would be the best to end up with a group that is more aggressive and less risk averse, because the leader who's above the FCs and taking feedback from them to know what the alliance should be doing in terms of being aggressive can also take the heat off those FCs as a non-FC who told them to do the thing when something bad happens, and that can enable them to be more aggressive.
This sounds like a description of a really good natural dampener on effectiveness as your group grows. Do you know what I mean by that?
No, please explain.
It's not an effective dampener though, because the groups still grow big and they just grow.
No, not at the moment. Not at the moment. But like a lot of things in Eve, there is a limit to the amount of effort people are willing to put in. I mean, you know, the reason that none of us in this channel are boxing 50 accounts to make money is because that's over the effort quota for us, right?
Yeah, if something's
but when a group,
you're not going to do it.
Yeah, when a group gets too big for the effort quota, what happens isn't that the group gets smaller. They just add another.
It becomes less
5
effective.
They add another 5 managers to.
It becomes less effective.
No, what happens is the pyramid changes is what happens. So instead of, one person managing 500 people, it becomes one person manages 500 or 5 people who manage 100 people each, right? Like the pyramid changes fundamentally, as groups grow larger. The funny thing is, actually, as we're having this conversation, I remembered back to kind of some of my older thinking. The issue is not command, like fleet commanders and leading. It's the issue of changing fleet commanders into generals, which is it's a very interesting thought process. But like in the real world, like generals don't fight battles, right? Like they become a strategic level manager versus an operational level manager, and like this is much
playing
the same
an RTS.
Yes. Well, I'm more utilizing like real life kind of like comparisons, unfortunately. But like the reality is that is what happens, right? Like the FC, as they hit a certain point, stop becoming focused on the battles and start becoming more focused on the campaigns and setting their military up for success, right?
And that's not a bad thing either. Like that's
if
you're running a big campaign, you need that guy.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm trying to tell you guys that increasing levels of management overhead is a bad thing, but it does very much feel to me like this is an obvious lever that could be pulled. I mean, earlier
by CCP.
Potentially by CCP. I mean, earlier we talked about, damn, what, you really expect me to go and manage fuel levels on this many structures? It's like, no, I expect you to manage fuel levels on fewer structures if you can't be bothered to do it for the larger ones there. Everybody has their limits as to how much effort they're willing to be putting into the game. And perhaps what we should a lot of people should stop asking CCP for is for CCP themselves to make changes to the game that removes a lot of effort overheads. Should have seen the crying in one of the CSM channels on Discord, one of the public CSM channels, when, for example, it started to make it so that PDS required big fat ammo be put into it. There was all caps lock shouting and swearing. Why do you hate logistics guys? I've now got to organize logistics guys to do 100 Fortizars. And the answer obviously is, well, don't bother to do that many then. These are natural effort dampeners.
The point of the PDS change wasn't to add a logistical burden. The PDS change would have been just
to add a logistical burden.
But the PDS change, I argue, would have been just as effective.
Hey, well, guess what? Here are the people complaining about it who showed that it did affect that in what I would argue is a positive way.
The people complaining about it are the logistics guys that are doing the work at the bequest of the FCs in charge. Like, that's the thing, is that FCs are in charge of all the major groups in the video game, but the FCs don't currently have anything worth going to war over. That's the problem.
Also, I just want to talk about this PDS change. Like, what actually would have changed in terms of people using PDS if instead of making it an ammo type, I had just made it so you don't need the ammo, but it has the exact same effects of going on a quote-unquote reload or cooldown for X amount of time after so many shots. Because that was the actual point of the change. The ammo was just a way to implement that change.
I'm talking about the side effect of the ammo causing these people to say that it was too much effort to
but the side effect
does sound like
the side effect wasn't that the ammo didn't distributed to all the structures, because it still did. The only side effect was people complaining. That's not a benefit.
Getting annoyed. Yeah,
just to be clear,
tedium.
Just to be clear,
adding tedium isn't a good strategy.
just to be clear, the logistics guys did complain when this change was enacted, and it's understandable because all of a sudden they had to go put all this shit in all these pauses. Much like the same as the logistics guys complained when we added cores to all of the fucking citadels, or when we changed the Athenors to all require different fittings or something. I can't remember what it was. There's been multiple times CCP has made changes, and all it does is fuck over the logistics guys really hard for like a week. But then, from then on, there's usually no adjustment at all. Like, nobody today is complaining about putting, flak ammo in citadels. Like, it's just part of the ammo package, right? Like, it's
it got
a temporary
absorbed
nuisance
into the effort.
Yes,
Yeah,
but like,
so
I think you're missing.
I buy ammo, so I just buy this other.
I think you're missing the point I'm trying to make here. Is that there is very much an effort limit, and we all go up to our effort limit in Eve.
Is it possible that
if that effort limit was higher, we would do more. If the effort limit was much higher for maintaining citadels, we would have more citadels. If the effort limit was a lot lower, then we won't go above that and we'll refuse to do it.
But I think my point is that if you say suddenly all the logistics guys, I don't care how you make the change, have to spend, it takes twice the amount of time as it currently does to maintain all their citadels. What's going to happen is not every group goes and takes down half their citadels. They're going to go ping, we need more logistics guys, and until they're going to make their logistics guys do a bit more work, and they're going to get more logistics guys, and it's going to keep chugging along. With those players being less happy with their gameplay. That doesn't 100%. Benefit anyone to have made that change.
There isn't an infinite, never-ending raising cap on how much effort people are willing to put in.
To a degree,
no, there isn't.
But it's important to remember there is kind of a floor, I guess you would call it. There's a floor on the amount of, like, for example, let's say citadels that you need to achieve what you want in a system, right? Like, if you need a Sodio or an Asbel, and you need X number of Athenors, you need X number of Metnox, etc. Like, you can't just, like, all of those citadels are doing things, right? So you will, have as many guys as it takes to fuel all of the citadels that are doing things. And if you say, yeah, well, then they require 3 times the logistics effort, then maybe some on the periphery that aren't doing anything will get pulled, sure. But the majority, the vast, vast majority, are doing things and won't get pulled.
But you just proved it. You just said that the effort is higher and it will reduce the number of X if the effort raises.
So
absolutely,
I just want to
clarify.
That
is not a linear line, is what I'm trying to indicate.
I just need to clarify, Phantomite, what does this do for FC culture exactly?
Oh, this is different. This is obviously a different subject at this stage.
Did we go back to
Citadels? Back into the main topic of Citadels.
Is this just a way to deal with Citadel spam, which we all just had a discussion about that we don't think is as much of an issue anymore?
Yeah, like Phantomite was like, anybody want to talk about Citadel spam? And everyone was like, no, we're
listen,
good.
This change
and he's like, hey, Phantomite
was multiple years
Citadel
ago.
spam. No, you're right. It was. But like...
But I just don't think this had anything to do with Citadel spam becoming less of a problem. It just was it was a complaint, but it was a non-issue.
Oh, Christ.
Anytime you make logistics people do work, they're going to go complain. Like that's just part of the process, right?
Sure.
Like,
and I don't blame them for that.
The type of person who enjoys logistics work also enjoys complaining. Like, that's just how it is.
The type of person who plays EVE Online is the type of person who enjoys complaining.
There you go. But hey, look.
So the type of player in EVE Online
listen,
complains when something about their gameplay changes. That's a constant.
The type of person, though, that's going to be an FC and is going to lead their people to battle is somebody who needs a goal to accomplish, right? And nullsec right now, and it always has been, create your own goals, right? The people in charge of people these days, they don't have the capacity to create their own goals. They're playing a sandbox game. They don't know how to build anything but a sandcastle. That's it. That's what it is. That's what happened, Phantomite. It's not that FCs aren't in charge. It's just that they're dog shit.
They know how to go kick over a sandcastle.
Yeah, but they don't want to.
Asher doesn't know how to go shoot a keep star.
Yeah, but what's the point?
That's the issue. That's the issue. Not that they don't know how. The issue is what's the point.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's no point. So why would they do it if there's no point to doing it?
Well, this is perhaps the closer subject for us, isn't it?
It doesn't have to be.
Like,
we're finally getting to the nuts.
how do you make people have some kind of desire to go and wage actual war rather than just go and kill a few ratters and come back?
You don't make them have a desire to go wage actual war because the desire already exists. Everybody wants to have a war. Everybody just wants to have a reason to
And
do
why
it.
is it not happening?
Well,
Because
what's
the
Major
reason?
barriers projection.
So what
Let's
right
be
now,
clear.
if the
Stop.
Imperium
Let's
were to invade
stop.
Panfam,
Redline, one
what
sec.
would they get out of it?
Let's be clear. Not everybody actually wants to fight a war. Like, you're starting from a wrong premise.
Do you
There are
want
a
to
lot
fight
of
a
people
war?
in Eve. I would probably enjoy it, yeah. But let's be clear here.
And that's what's
When
important.
we talk about Eve Online, the majority of people don't actually want to fight a war. They want to just, do their occasional PvP fleet, go mine in their fucking belts, do their fucking anoms, etc., right? That is probably the majority of EVE Online players, not the people who are fucking bloodthirsty fucking savages who want to go, sit in a Fortizar, one jump from the enemy staging and fight for their life every day. Like,
I mean,
that is
personally, I pretty much never crabbed in this game. But I also don't want to go fight a nullsec war. That has zero interest to me. That sort of grindy campaign, I wouldn't find it fun, and that's fine.
Yeah, and somebody in chat said, people want to win a war but not lose one, which is correct, right? And much the same, people want to enjoy the good parts of war, but they don't want to enjoy the bad parts of war. And
What are the bad
unfortunately,
parts of war?
every day, every minute, every second, where you're not actually engaging in reasonable fun battles.
500 uncontested structure bashes.
Yes,
or in the case of Delph, 4,000 structure bashes. That's how many it was.
There's literally a 23/7 standing fleet of shooting structures in Delph. That's how many structures there were.
Villy, if your argument is that people should be left alone to decide if they want to go to war or not in nullsec and EVE Online, then what is the point of nullsec?
It's a sandbox.
I'm not saying that. What did you say? Say that again, Phantom. Sorry.
If you're, and correct me if I'm wrong about your argument here, but if your argument is, hey, we shouldn't tell people that they have to go to war as what nullsec is. Sometimes they just want to chill. What's the point in nullsec?
Well, the problem is that you need to create incentives, right? Like, that is the fundamental,
Oh, like what? What can we do? What can we do?
Great. So if you want to shape human behavior, you use incentives. That has been the most proven path.
It worked before, so what's wrong?
What is wrong? So it's a combination of power projection, the ease at which the null blocks can move around the map, which affects the geographic way in which the powers are kind of situated. So I would first remove basically any ability to use jump bridges more than 20 light years outside of whatever your staging is, maybe. So that you lose kind of that power projection.
Projection's too long. Yeah, you can skip the specifics on that. I think we all agree with that.
Yeah, I would increase the. I'd have to really think about this.
What are the disincentives then? Right now.
Well,
war is fucking expensive.
Projection is the number one disincentive for me.
That's all right. We know we talked about projection. We know that's the big one. What after that? What else aside from projection?
The cost of the ships that you're gonna fight with.
Yeah, I would say costs, especially since we discussed the cost of citadels earlier. The costs of attacking versus the costs of what you're killing is very out of whack, and that's a disincentive. Do I want to go feed 100 bill to kill a fort?
For a 10 bill structure?
Well, and it's important to remember, what is the incentive for the attacker, right? Like, in historic days, historic real world stuff, people would go on, Viking raids to loot and pillage the places they were going to, right? They would take all of their shit and bring it back home, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that, we need citadels drop all the loot kind of mechanics, but
it should drop some.
There needs to be some level of, for example, let's say you destroy a citadel, everything that gets sent to asset safety, that valuation drops in fucking SDC core, 10 mil little tokens, whatever they're fucking called.
Oh,
Like,
that
so
would be
you know,
so inflationary.
Yeah,
no
but
way.
if the assets
But
exist
you're on
at
the
the
right
same
track.
time as the tokens, then that's
So-
just
So let's
that's just
say
inflation. That's just
no, but you
let's-
can't. But you
let's
can't
say
pull them out of asset
instead-
safety unless the.
I mean,
Sorry.
there's an obvious one here. I mean, we
just
used
make it
to
so
have
that part of it
co-
drops. It's easy.
We used to have extreme value in the in like R64s and stuff. That used to be one of the extreme value assets. What meant that you'd want to go and take that region for all of its moons, so you could get for the time, before a lot of the inflation. Oh, here's 400 bill income from here. That's something worth going to go and get.
I think
That
Metnoxes
income
have
is
partially
back.
brought that back. I do want to
Partially
address
is the
something real
thing.
quick. I want to address something real quick from chat. People are like, "Oh, these alliances have trillions of ISK and they don't want to go to war because it's too expensive." You're right. All these alliances can't afford to go to war. The issue isn't that it's too expensive for them. The issue is that the cost of going to war is too unbalanced from the prize of going to war. If you made the current cost of going to war 2 times more expensive, that's not the issue. The issue is what do you get from it is too unbalanced compared to the price. Like, yes, we know that null blocks are not poor. They can afford to replace the hundreds of billions of losses easily. That's not where the cost is an issue.
Yeah.
Just so you know, obviously, we'll go and get some things. We'll carry on talking about this, but Villy does have to head off. Villy, have you got any final words for us before we crack on?
No final words. Just you guys are all beautiful gentlemen. Take care of yourselves.
Love you, Villy.
Thank
Have
you
a
for
great
coming
rest
on.
of your
We
Sunday.
will see you again.
All right, cheers, brothers.
Now that he's gone, I have a great idea to propose that I think that I was told earlier about how to make people want to kill structures. It's related to your idea about having like the SCC bonds from asset safety. What if I kill a structure, people who have to pay asset safety fees because of that structure, I get part of the asset safety fee to the alliance who killed it.
Inflationary.
Interesting.
But it's not inflationary. It's not inflationary.
It's not. It's just taking what otherwise would have been sunk.
It's removing part of it as sink, but it's not really that. I don't think it's significant enough of a sink. But it's not creating the ISK from nothing. It's taking a portion of the ISK the other player is having to pay to get the asset.
I am heavily opposed to that kind of mechanic because I think literally the only thing that it does is encourage excessively large groups to headshot stagings. It does not encourage people to fight over the smaller citadels that make up a network or make up someone's space. It just encourages me to go with 300 dudes, headshot somebody's fort so that they have to pay us 50 bill in asset safety fees whenever those people log back in again, and then go home.
That's absolutely a fair point. That is absolutely a huge downside to this idea.
Because what happens
argue
if
against
you
that.
shoot my random gate Astrahus? Nobody has anything in it. You get 40 mil in tokens because somebody left a Sino alt in there. Whoops. It's worthless. And so it doesn't matter, with the single exception of staging citadels, which are not the ones you want getting destroyed willy-nilly. You want those to be the apex of a campaign or a key battle in some other focus.
Just a quick intro. Brainstraw, famed solo and small gang pilot who is incredibly elite and flies with ultra high grade slaves, is now with us here in channel.
Let's lower that down a smidge.
I'm very opinionated. No.
We all are.
How's it going?
That's why we all get to be on the show. You have to have an extremist opinion to be here, obviously.
My only comment, obviously I don't partake in nullsec shenanigans that much anymore, but my only comment really about the, incentive thing to go to war is I feel like people treat this game too much like a chore and not as much as a video game. Because,
that's because
going back to Michael's part. Well, and the thing is I don't disagree with what Michael is saying in regards to, the incentive to do a full-scale war doesn't outweigh the amount of ISK that you'll most likely put into it. But at the same time, it's you see all these null groups, line members specifically, complaining about how bored they are, but then it's nobody wants to actually go make their own fun, I guess.
I don't want to appear
So
like
it's just
I'm like ganging up with you, Brainstraw, against other
It's
other
just
Care
me
Bears who
now,
might be
by the
tuned in,
way.
but like these, I feel that very much like these very same people will refuse to undock unless they outnumber the enemy 2, 4, or 10 to 1. They demand that they get some kind of a fight, even though they refuse the idea of having to live close to the war zone. They want their super highway all the way there so that they don't actually have to live within the risk of this.
Okay, so I have to address something. I have to address something in the chat. There was a request for a poll that I have to reject because that was the last poll that we did, was our nullsuckers cowards, and the results were yes, and I doubt that they would change this time. But the point...
I totally agree with
what
Brainstorm
not
was
cowards.
saying.
So if you think about it, most of the nullsec PvP happens in SIGs, because that gives the opportunity for people who want to crab, and for people who want to fight, they can go and fight. That is typically how it's going to go. Is that maybe going to lead into a full-scale war? Possibly, but most likely not. Most likely not.
I mean,
well, and I think the overall
always are going to exist. The point of the discussion isn't like, oh, we need to accommodate for these people who don't. Let's face it, there's tons of Care Bears who are never going to want to fight. You're right, and they're always just going to want to Ishtar spin and immediately dock up, and they have no interest in fighting a war. The point is like, how can we change game structures so that the people in charge of these groups can go, I want to take us to war because there's a benefit to it, and then all these idiots who don't want to fight, well, they'll get dragged along with it because
I have 2 questions.
You're coming with us.
Two questions.
I agree.
No, Phantom, I have 2 questions.
Fight.
I will forget them if you don't let me ask them. My first question is, Nuke, if Citadels dropped a percentage of what was in them as some sort of asset that you could then obtain in exchange for ISK, would you and your alliance go and kill Citadels in your area to earn that valuable asset?
Yes.
Okay, follow-up question. How long do you think it would be before the people that place down the Citadels that you're destroying and taking their shit just quit the game entirely?
Well, my point.
I don't think that would
just to be clear,
You
I
don't
don't
think that would
want
happen?
the change to be that I kill the structure and I take their stuff.
Sure.
My idea was that
incentive.
when they pay asset safety, the same asset safety they're already paying, a portion of it goes to the alliance who killed the structure as a reason to kill it. But I don't think using snuff is a great example here because we already just kill all the structures around us for fun anyways because we're bored. That incentive, we don't need that incentive.
I'm asking,
structure.
would it increase?
This is more of a nullsec might need this incentive structure.
Would your incentive to kill structures, like, would that be enough for you to do it more? I guess.
Yes, but I would say sort of, because our incentive to quickly kill structures near us would increase, but I don't think our incentive to go further away to kill structures that we weren't already killing, I don't think we'd go that much further.
So question to the low-seckers, what is your disincentive to invade nullsec?
Oh,
I don't like
this is a good one.
Well,
I am technically in low sec right now, but I don't like low sec. I think low sec smells. No offense, Nuke. But
you can be offensive to low sec.
Hey, listen, that's
shit,
your
and they
own
smell.
underwear
It's fine.
from being so scared of how violent we are.
Oh my god. Here we go.
But in any case,
what's your disincentive? Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
The question I pose to people when I talk about this is just point somewhere on the map in nullsec where I can take my 40 to 50 dudes. We can form fleets that range from 30 to 70 or 80 if we're really sweating. Where can we go and take a constellation?
I couldn't tell you. Probably.
Well, here's the problem, right?
That is the answer.
But I can tell you.
This all circulates back to I mean, I know we don't want to get into it, the projection issue. I think just nullsec in general is in much need of a big shakeup fundamentally. But currently, with the way that the mechanics are set up, I think that the players are a lot more to blame than they may realize for why nullsec is so stale. But I also do agree that it is on CCP to shake it up, because obviously, like the way things are now, the players, the nullsec has been how it is now for what, like 4 or 5 years. Like people aren't going to change their behavior.
So when you mention
this point, like there are a lot of other things that used to also be in the way that CCP has actually fixed. The Munin meta was awful for small to medium groups. The ship meta now is kind of fine. I actually really like it personally. I know some people still have beef with certain things, but overall I like it. And things like the Alliance not really getting any income from Sovnull unless you had renters has also been solved with the advent of Metanox, Skyhooks, and the Mercdens.
It's not at a high enough level to be worth going to war over, though.
I would go to war. I just can't.
So that's the thing. The nullsec alliances don't have a reason to go to war with each other because each alliance has the same thing. I am not saying that scarcity breeds conflict, because it does not. I am, however, saying that there's no incentive.
It is difficult to argue against.
There's no incentive because everybody's got the same stuff. That's the thing. But
scarcity doesn't.
But Murray
doesn't breed conflict. One side having shit and the other side not having shit makes a conflict.
Yes, exactly.
But everyone has a shit, or no one has the shit.
So here's the position that Murray is in. Murray wants to invade Nullsec, but Murray can't invade Nullsec because he only has 50 friends. Now that's not a bad thing on Murray. That's just how it is. That's what he just said.
Murray can't invade Nullsec.
He just said it. I'm saying point.
No.
Now listen, if Murray got together with another couple groups that had 50 guys to 80 guys each, they could make a pretty sizable force to invade Nullsec. Why doesn't that happen?
Well, here's the problem, right? So let's say, like, Murray... We could even use, like, Goran as an example, right? Like, this most recent Provi shit that we're forced out of at the moment.
Sure.
Is, like, we could form the numbers to fight AO or RMC or whatever on our own, right? But the problem is that once these groups that have been in their space for so long now actually feel some sort of threat, then they're just going to call goons or pay Snuff, for example, like they did, to come help them. And then they celebrate, like, killing the content. But then, 1 or 2 weeks from now, they're just going to be complaining about how bored they are again. So it's like, I feel like there's just no winning, no matter what you try to do.
There are lots of groups I think I could beat. I think I could probably beat up some of the people in Pure Blind. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think I could.
Right.
And
I think you
people.
You're talking about like the Phoenix kill up there? Absolutely, you could.
The second that they are legitimately threatened, or I put down a citadel that's not a small pos, guess who's there?
I'm there.
And I think also the idea that like 50 people, like 50 humans, could successfully take a single constellation, like a very small amount of space, is a pretty reasonable ask.
It's a pretty reasonable ask.
I mean, I agree.
The problem is that people from a quarter of the map away can just arrive to any strategic objective.
Well, that's the problem, right?
Look, just arrive, they would know when to be there and leave early to get there on time.
Sure, but I think that you would get...
That hits upon the effort limit, though. That people are willing to put a certain amount of effort in. If it gets to the point where they would have to take 3 hours to prepare to go to the other side of the map, then they may just decide they're not going to do it. That the effort limit is extremely real.
I have a very spicy hot take for you guys.
Fantastic.
Related to they all know when to show up. Discord has been the worst thing for EVE content, enabling it, making it so much fucking easier for people to call, to communicate about timers, all that shit. Discord's been awful for that.
You are the dumbest.
We'd have more fights if Discord hadn't made it as easy.
Literally the dumbest person I've ever met.
Whoa, no, he's right. He's right.
No, I'm just fucking with him anyway.
No, listen.
But Discord is great because it allows people to communicate, and communication is key. And you have to have communication in this game, otherwise you don't have anything. Remember, if you didn't have Discord, you also wouldn't have your easy spies that no one knows how to get rid of, apparently.
It's a wishful thinking thing. Nuke, I know that this is what you mean, but perhaps we'll just briefly expand upon it. In Armor 2 and Armor 3, there are mods for the game that integrate with TeamSpeak. It's a military sim. rather than
familiar.
like yeah. Anyway, so there are, and I believe it works with other communication software as well, but there were plugins for TeamSpeak that would simulate real radio problems, like needing line of sight for your radios to communicate with each other.
That's not what I meant. That's not where I was going with this.
Let me get to the point. Let me get to the point.
Are you suggesting that we start hacking our enemies' Discord servers to disable
My
their
point is here
communication?
that if you are playing a game co-op or even team versus team, nobody is going to be able to. It would be so cool if, like, you know, your friend died and you just couldn't hail them on the radio anymore. You don't know what happened to them. But in these games, your mate dies. They say, "Oh yeah, it's this guy. He's hiding behind that door." And that's very much kind of what I think that you're getting at when you say that Discord allows no one's going to limit themselves.
What I was getting at was it allows cross-group communication a lot easier. Yes, I know before Discord, everyone would have big FCs on different sides would have a group that know each other and be able to contact each other. But if some random group gets their shit hit by another small group and wants to call snuff, how easy it is for them to go to the EVE Online Discord, find some random snuff person to go DM on Discord.
It's so easy.
That's what I was getting at in terms of, I don't think there's any way to fix it. I just wanted to make that hot take of Discord has made it too easy for me to batphone someone.
Yeah, and I also think that we should have proximity voice in EVE Online, frankly.
I mean, I think circling back though to the topic, like, I agree with Phantom in the sense that, like, the more effort that would have to be used to actually show up to these bigger fights, like, less people would show up. Because you could use, like, I mean, I'll just say it, like, one thing that we typically do with Goran when we do these deployments, if, like, the groups that we're fighting are too big, you know, like, they'll probably outform us the first 1 or 2 times. But if we just blue ball them, you know, the first 2 timers or 3 timers, like, eventually their line members are going to stop showing up because it's just a waste of their time. And then we can take a fight on, like, the 4th try. But, like, with Antiblexes currently... Exactly, but, like, with Antiblexes currently, like, it's no sweat off Goon's back to fucking, you know, take 500 dudes and take their Antiblex network down 15 minutes all the way down to Pravi to help them if they get called. Whereas if you'd have to leave, you know, if you had to commit 3 or 4 hours, like, they would definitely get way less people to show up, if at all.
I think that's an important difference in terms of what effort means there, because in that case, the effort has to be done and spread out among random line members. They all have to put in the effort to show up and get down there, versus logistical problems where that effort is being shunted onto a much smaller group, and that can be managed much easier by the group to not be a problem. Whereas the effort of showing up to a fight is not something they can mitigate if that goes up by getting more people to help, because all the people still have to put in the same effort to get to the fight.
Sure, but not as many people are going to have, like, 3 or 4 hours to commit versus, like, a 20 or 30 minute.
No, I'm agreeing that. I agree that in this case, increasing the effort required is a good thing. And I was just explaining why I think this way of increasing effort is different than, say, making logistics people carry more fuel blocks around.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, it's just like, I mean, if you just open the map, right? Like, look at regions now, like Scalding Pass or Wicked Creek or, you know, wherever the fuck, where all these regions now are owned by these, like, big-ass groups, but they don't even have to live there to keep the space, because if somebody like Murray's group or like Goran, you know, we just decided, oh, well, let's go move into Wicked Creek, for example, like, we're just going to have a block in our fucking face in 20 minutes.
Somehow it keeps coming back to Antiblexes, no matter what. We can't get away from them.
It's difficult to talk about other major problems in EVE because so many of these problems, suggestions for solutions to other problems are like, yeah, but Ansiblex. So I know it's difficult, but we kind of got to imagine that we're in a world post Ansiblex.
I just want to let you know,
hoping, begging that CCP.
And here's the thing too: is
before you
I don't think
right. I want to make sure that you know that I am uploading a sound to the soundboard with the Pee Wee Herman secret word scream. And if I hear either of you say projection or Ansiblex again, I'm going to play it every time. Every time.
All right. Jump gates it is, boys.
Fucker.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think that they should kill him, because I think that, you know, like you guys were talking about earlier, where I think the way that Eve used to be, where you just had to commit so much time to do things, is kind of a thing of the past. But I think that it's just too easy to get around right now. So like there has to be a middle ground where everyone is happy.
I liked the idea. I don't know who proposed it, of limiting the antiplexes more your antiplex network can only go so far, and you making it so you couldn't link into another antiplex network. Because
you're really pushing it, aren't you?
Sorry, you're right. No, so, let me think of a better way to word it.
I mean, yeah, the idea.
I do agree with not just deleting them, because you want to keep the benefit of allowing line members to move around their own space easier is fine to keep. Like that sort of thing isn't the problem.
I think that's a problem as well. I think that they should serve as an occasional strategic shortcut, not as a daily means of general travel.
Well, fortunately, they conveniently are useful. Even the old flavors were useful because they had the logistics fatigue reduction.
Well, here's the point that I always bring up when this topic comes up. So think about back to like 2014 or 2015 when PL was still, PL, and this was before they had jump fatigue in the game, and they would show up to every fucking fight with their massive capital fleet in 20 minutes. And CCP finally, spoke up, and they were like, okay, yeah, maybe this is too broken. So they added the fatigue mechanic to prevent being able to move around the map with that many people in that short of time. But now here we are, kind of 10 steps backwards, where we're having the same problem. Sure, it's not like cap fleets, but you just have people doing it with like 1,000 subcaps instead, and it's kind of the same issue.
I would rather it be...
And the thing back then, too, is people were complaining about PL. They were like, this is so stupid. Like, even, groups like Goons, they were like, fucking PL, like, this is so OP, they can do this. But now, suddenly, everyone thinks it's completely okay, and it's just kind of boring.
It's whoever has the advantage. If you're the one making use of something that gives you an advantage, you're not the one who's going to be saying this should be nerfed.
True.
And so that's why they're not complaining now. You can frame it as like, hey, don't you realize you're being hypocritical? But it's a completely different set of people, because that was a decade ago. And they're the ones who are winning with it this time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they need to do to make it better, but...
Something people disagree with. I think it's so annoying, because I would legitimately rather be in a position where someone is instantly teleporting 50 caps to me than the position where someone's instantly teleporting 100 subs to me. That might just be my bias, but
the problem is it's not 100 subs, is it? It's 500.
No, it's not 100 subs.
Listen, they can already teleport a lot of subs to you through wormholes, but not that many like Null does.
And if the wormholes, someone brought up drifter wormholes in chat earlier, and like, oh, drifter wormholes hiding. Like, I can't fit a 70 bar guests through your drifter wormhole. Like,
well, and the thing is too is
go back again as well.
I'm totally cool with, like, let's say I roll my wormhole into Goon space, and I'm 5 jumps out of UAL. I have no issue with them having the ability to jump ahead of me if I need to run back to my wormhole, because like I'm in their home region. My issue is that they can own a region fucking, 3 or 4 regions away, and also defend that with no issues.
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of where the problem is. And like I think a lot of line members seem to think that when people are suggesting nerf Ansiblex, they want people to like completely delete it.
You said it.
They want people to completely delete it from the game, and I don't think that that's anyone thinking logically is what they want. I think that what people mean, at least when I say it, is like, I don't think that it's healthy for the game that these groups can own all this space and not actually have to actively live in it and defend it. They can just show up and defend it if they need to, whenever they want.
Bring
Now
back
that you mentioned
Summer
living in
Bloom.
space,
God bless.
now that you mentioned living in the space, is it time to mention that ADM Can we say that ADM completely failed at the goal of making people having to live in their space?
This sounds like a topic for a following show as we approach the 2-hour mark for today.
Facts.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to each of you and I'm going to sort of ask you as a sort of final thing, like if there was one thing you could change about Citadels to get back, just finally back to our original topic, so I don't have to trigger. If there was one thing that you could change about them, then what would it be? And you sort of just give, you've got the magic wand, you got one genie wish here. Don't worry about it being a monkey paw. That's for a full discussion another day. But while you think of that, what I will say is that naming no names at the moment, because it's yet to be confirmed, but next week we would very much like to hear from people for, against, neutral side topics around mining and the mineral price index, questions that you might have if there was somebody on the show who might be able to give some more info on those there.
Are you trying to hype it up? Are you trying to hype up the show next week? Because if you are, you can just
I'm trying to get some questions ahead of time.
You can just say who's going to be there, and we can make a Google form for questions, bro. We can tell everybody who's coming to the show next week.
Get into the cesspool.
World-renowned miners, dude.
We'll be pinging a link there.
Not miners, dude.
We'll be pinging a link there for concerns around.
Say who's coming to the show, or can you not?
What?
You should.
Well, okay, all right. Hey, listen, everybody watching. Next week, organisation and time's going well. We are hoping to be speaking with CCP Akami. He'll be visiting us to give us a little bit of a follow-up on the director's chat and a post that he made on the Eve Discord, looking to talk about mining and help people to understand where CCP want to go with it.
Yes.
And also to get to know him, because he's a relatively new member of CCP as well. But if I come back to you guys, our guests, Brainstraw, I know that you joined us towards the end of today, but if there was one thing about Citadels you could change, what might that be?
I think that it would just be what I mentioned in the chat about Tether being a fitted module instead. I think that there should be some opportunity cost to your Citadels and the way that you fit them. I don't think that they should be able to offer just a complete safe zone in space and also be able to just completely defend itself with no issues. So I think that, if you want to have a tether on your Citadel, for example, I think that it should be able to still have some offensive capability, but I don't think that it should just be able to do it automatically, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I think we get that. Murray, one thing you could change about them. What do you reckon?
Hopefully I'm not stealing this from Nuke, but the timer roll to one side is something that, it's talked about a lot before, but I think is a really good way of reducing suffering.
And Nuke, I mean, if that is what you want to go with as well, then that's just.
Well, I have a different one.
Go for it.
I have a different one that'll make more people upset. Super capital docking should go back to not being a thing.
Ooh,
that's a whole subject of what if.
Based.
Yeah,
that's spicy.
I get it.
That's spicy.
All right, let's run it for another hour, boys.
Hey, listen. Inevitably, we are gonna debate Citadels for 15 hours again on this show.
On this show,
it's going to happen, and it's bro, we're going to do it again and again and again forever.
The last thing
listen,
that I
we're
did
going to be 80 years old and still complaining about Citadels here. Okay,
defend the Keepster.
Before I hand it over to you for what you might change, Redline, I think that something I'd like to say, which we didn't get to touch on here, is I would make it so that Citadels were not anchorable within 1 AU of a Stargate.
A classic.
You're so silly, dude.
Again, subject for another day. What about you, Redline? What might you do?
Well, it's kind of like I was talking about before. I think one of the biggest things is that a Citadel, you have to look at it as a battlefield, because that's all it is, right? It's not going to be this magic content driver for everybody. That's why there's so many different ways for content to exist within the video game and within nullsec, with the skyhooks, mednogs, whatever, what have you, right? You can find something to do with your small gangs. But I do think that there should be some way to disable services of Citadels, specifically tethering, in some cases even docking. Like, I think that if you take a system from somebody, their Citadel should get locked out. You know, that'd be fun. Be crazy. And it would give you an incentive to actually do it. And I agree with
Wouldn't that
Skyhawk.
stop you from using them as a forward operating base?
You know what? That's a conversation
sounds
for
like
a different day.
This sounds like another show.
I had ample opportunity to think this through, and I didn't do it. So please don't call me on it. Please don't. Please. But anyways, I think it would be fun to introduce some sort of a hacking mechanic to Citadels for smaller groups to enjoy, but also to create another kind of requirement for fleet comps. If you're wanting to come do a structure bash, you know, you bring this type of ship and it disables the weapons, but it also puts a shining beacon on that ship from the enemies that they're going to want to kill it. So that would be amazing, actually. Now that I think about it, we have to have a show about Citadels now. Fuck.
That's what the show was meant to be.
Wait.
Hey, listen.
The whole
This
thing?
is a double-length show, and we are not halfway through the topic of Citadels. So yeah, it's going to happen again.
But not.
I was really worried you were going to say this is a double link show. We're here for another 2 hours, and I was going to be like, oh no.
A Trash Talk Tuesday episode on Citadels? No, I think that I would like. I only want constructive things, right? I don't like nerfing anything ever. I would rather just, you know, buff everything to be in line with how powerful other stuff is. But that's...
I think you'd better raid somebody before I start debating you on your terminology and how weird it is there.
You
That's definitely a hot take.
You don't like a little bit of power creep in your life? You don't like a little bit of power creep?
Just saying a nerf to one thing is a buff to the others. To call one thing, to define what is a nerf and what is a buff as separate things is just madness.
Oh yeah, is that right? Well, hey, listen. I think that if one ship is really good, you should make an effort to make all the other ships really good to match it, instead of making that one ship bad. How about that?
Counterpoint. Because people always talk about buffing T1 cruisers, I think it's totally fine that they're shit. They should be. They're Tech 1 ships.
Damn. Well, I did start a raid. We're raiding.
Who is everyone? Who is talking about buffing T1 cruisers? I've never heard
this is more of like a small gang fucking
okay.
circle thing where people. Well, it's like the new generation of small gangers that think everything should be OP. And they're like, dude, T1 cruisers suck. Buff them. And
that's an oxymoron.
From
everything
the chat,
should be
Tether
OP.
looks ugly. Tether should be made pretty. Make Tether pretty again. Anyways,
Yeah,
I'm gonna click this raid button
maybe put some glitter
so
into
that
the
you
beam.
guys can go hang out with someone who he's doing some wormhole stuff. He's killing drifters, I think. Anyways, have fun hanging out with him, and we'll see you next week.